Today I'm going to be teaching you the Buchner funnel technique. When you would use this technique is when you have any mixture that has both a solid and liquid product in it, and you want to isolate and rinse off that solid product so you can use that for any further evaluation. And you can use different things when you're using the Buchner funnel, such as different funnel sizes, different filter papers, different rinsing materials, as well as whether or not to use a trap in your Buchner funnel apparatus setup. And a trap is a secondary container that will catch any runoff that might be sucked into the vacuum source and possibly contaminate the vacuum source itself. You can see the trap here, the flask with the arrow pointing to it. And this is the best setup apparatus. It shows it with the clamps on both flasks. For the purpose of this video, I removed the clamp from the Buchner funnel flask, but best practice you would not. I only did that so that I could tilt around that flask to properly demonstrate what was inside of it. And here's the setup without the clamp on the Buchner funnel flask. And again, I did that so that I could show what was inside of it, but you can see here the tubing leads from the Buchner funnel flask to the trap setup where it will catch any of that runoff, and then that tubing will continue on to the vacuum source, which in this case is a water tap that's sucking the air through the tubing, through the trap, and all the way from the Buchner funnel, creating that vacuum seal that's going to catch all of our liquid runoff. For the purposes of this video, I use benzoic acid and distilled water to create a mixture with a solid and a liquid in it, but generally you'd be doing this after a preliminary reaction. And you combine these two reagents in a flask just to make that heterogeneous mixture where you can easily separate out the solid from the liquid in the vacuum flask. Here you can see me combining the water into the crystalline benzoic acid and then mixing it up to make sure that it is thoroughly distributed throughout the distilled water. And next I am picking that filter paper that will match the size of my funnel opening in my Buchner funnel and making sure that I seat that paper with water before I start my filtration process. This is an essential step. If you miss this, your product can get underneath the filter paper as it'll curl up when you turn on the vacuum source if you have not properly seated it, making sure that it is wet and creating a vacuum seal with the funnel itself, getting ready for you to pour that product on top of it. And when you turn on the vacuum source, you should see the water you just used to seat the paper with run out of the bottom of the funnel. Here you can see my precipitate cooling in ice to make sure that it is fully solid before I start the filtration process. Once you can have that solidification, you can just pour it right on top of the filter paper, being gentle to make sure that you're not splashing over the edge so you don't lose any product. And you can already see it starting to pull the liquid through the bottom. I additionally rinsed my flask with some more DI water to make sure that all of that solid product wasn't clinging to the sides of the flask, but instead was being dumped out onto my filter paper so that it can be isolated and I can use it for my workup at the end of my experiment. Again, this was just for the purpose of the video, but usually you'd be isolating that product so that you could mass it or analyze it in a different way to make sure that your reaction happened in the way that you thought it was going to. And when you're removing the filter paper, you're just going to want to run a spatula or a scoopula around the edges to gently lift it, and then tilt the Buchner funnel over, keeping the paper flat so that you don't lose any of that solid product as you're removing the filter paper, and just putting it onto a watch disc so that we can get it ready for drying. And when you're drying, you're going to put it into the oven, but you want to put it on the filter paper and then into a larger dish so that it's more protected. I generally use something like whey paper to put underneath of my watch disc so that I can easily remove it after the drying. And when you're drying, you just want to set that oven to the right temperature. So I set it to right below my melting point of my product at 105 degrees. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose any of that solid product by it melting into the filter paper. I want it to be easily removable off of the filter paper. So I made sure that all of the water was fully dried out of my product, and then I removed it from the oven with a heat-safe glove so I didn't burn myself on the hot glass. And then you can see here that I have a very crystalline product, and that is actually the easiest solid product to isolate through the Buchner funnel filtration. If you're using a very fine powder, it might kind of coat the filter paper, and then it's harder to separate for things like massing. And it's best to use non-organic or non-hazardous materials so that you're not worrying about toxicity when it comes to putting it in the oven or when it comes to breathing it in at all. And I would like to say a huge thank you to the University of New England Department of Math and Physical Sciences for supplying the resources to create this video. And I would also like to say a special thank you and appreciation to Dr. Amy DeVoe for her time and expertise that guided me in making this video for future students to use.